here we are. This is Art Story with Samantha Salzinger. Thank you so much for joining us today and allowing us into your home, into your workspace.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I'm excited.
Great. Me too. And well, I always like to start with the way that I discover whoever I'm talking to, which was we met at the Diana Lowenstein's. It was called Land of the Lost, an exhibition, a group exhibition that you were part of. And you had some amazing photography there and a video, sort of a movie playing. And it just really impacted me, definitely triggered my sweet tooth, and my family's as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved in that show and how you prepared for it?
Yeah, I was asked by Felice Grodin to participate in that show. She and I have known each other a long time, and she's familiar with my work, but not that new work. Mm-hmm. So that particular body of work, which I'm calling sugar-coated, is very, very new, and it was even more new at that time. Like, I was really just starting it. So I was really excited to have that opportunity to be in that show. And I think the Land of the Lost, I think the premise of the show had to do with like this sort of otherworldly places. And I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I think it had something to do with the television show from the 70s,
Sure.
the 60s or 70s. And yeah, so I think for me, what was really exciting about that opportunity was for such an early body of work, for me to have feedback like that was so helpful, because like one of the ways that I work, when I start a body of work, I like it to be a little bit more intuitive than intellectual, because I have a tendency to get very intellectual about what I'm doing and conceptualize it. And if I do that too early on in a body of work, it can like make it so I kind of halts my progress. So in the beginning, I often just like to work intuitively. Mm-hmm. And so for me at that point, it was actually really good to have so much feedback so that I can move forward and have a firmer grasp on where I want that body of work to go.
So the feedback you were getting, was it from Felice in the process of producing the work, or
no, people coming to the show?
Right.
You included,
gotcha.
which
Okay.
we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
You included, because there's a lot. I can speak for myself as an artist, but I think most artists might agree with this. Is that we have ideas in our artists have ideas in our head, or I do have ideas in my head about what I want something to be, what I want it to be about, and what I'm trying to convey visually, telling a story, like the narrative behind it. But it's interesting to hear feedback from other people to see if it is either it is what I'm trying to convey working, for one, and even if it's not, well, what is it saying? And getting that feedback I think is crucial, because sometimes we can't see it. It's like we're underwater artists, we're just not able to see the water in front of us. So it was very, very helpful. And you had a comment that was interesting to me, because you had said something like, I want to say this the right way, but it was almost like you were a little dismissive of the work because you thought it was AI, and I don't mean it as, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's just AI. But I thought that was an amazing comment, because I was like, no, this takes me a lot of time to make this. They're all handmade. But what was great about that is my work is all about simulating reality. Like even the older work I made prior to this, it's all about the way photography isn't real in the first place, and how we always think that it's real. So I've always been interested in the real and the fake. I had not really thought about AI. So actually that added a much more interesting aspect of this work that I would never have thought about myself.
Well, I didn't mean it as a dig or anything like that, but it just looks so perfect. I couldn't imagine that you actually built these things from the ground up. It looked like you typed into something, please make mounds and mounds of ice cream for me or something, So it's amazing to learn that you actually construct these things. And well, I'm glad you didn't take it the wrong way.
No, not at all. Actually, it was flattering. I thought, wow, I'm making these so real that people think they're AI.
They look edible.
It didn't even really occur to me, because sometimes I often feel like a little bit of a magician because and I wonder like if people can see the trick, because I see the background, like I see the set, so to speak.
Sure.
So do people see the set? Do they not see the set? So it's always interesting to me to get people's feedback on my work. I felt like that the first time I started making these dioramas, which was like in the early 2000s, like 2004, 2005, so maybe mid 2000s, I started making them. And the very first show that I had of these pieces, very, very early work. Actually, it's like this one behind me. This is from that series. Yeah, and they were really these like very traditional landscapes, and they were inspired by, and that, subsequently the whole body of work after it was inspired by the Natural History Museum. So I was also interested in the idea of like the way we're constructing history via the landscape and like the fakeness and the real. So the more real I can make these dioramas, I feel like the more I'm blurring that line between what is real and what isn't real. So the early ones, I just remember the very first show I had. I remember the first person to walk up to the pieces, and they turned to me and said, "Wow, you must travel. You must go to a lot of different places." And I thought, just like the way your comment, I was like, "Oh, wow, this is great." Like they're not understanding that these are fake. And then it's only until people really start to look.
Sure.
And then they're like, "Oh yeah, obviously this isn't real."
It looks like some kind of, without my glasses on, like it could be like an Ansel Adams or something. Is this like based on like a real place though, or? None of them are ever really based on real places, but the early ones were a little more like crude. I don't think they were as realistic as the later ones I started to make, because I got better and better at making them. And you started using regular film, like a film camera?
Yeah. I was using film. What was kind of really funny and ironic about, especially these very traditional landscapes, is I was using a 4x5. I was using a large format camera, just the way Ansel Adams did in Yosemite, but I'm photographing these little dioramas, so it was very strange. You
could blow them up big like this, and they just the clarity is amazing.
Yeah, and I don't do that anymore because it's too expensive and not worth it. I think back in the early 2000s, digital cameras weren't as good as they are now. So now there's really no need to do that. But I don't do a lot of digital alterations. There's not. I try to do as little as possible. When I say like as little as possible, I don't even. Really, it's the skies mostly that I put in digitally, and not always. Sometimes it's actually a physical print that I make, an enormous print that I literally put behind the. So sometimes I do physically put the sky behind it. Sometimes I don't, just because it's not really cost effective. There's no purpose to it. I really can just.
Clip it in later,
but but the most I can do as a physical thing, the better.
Really cool. And do you start out with like a sketch, like on paper or something? How do you conceptualize these different ideas?
That's a good question. No, I don't sketch them out. It's usually just a vague idea in my head, and a lot of it is very intuitive. I like to work, this new body of work were new materials that I haven't really worked with before, so that was kind of exciting too, to try to figure out how to make something, and then it would just form into it's kind of like an organic working on. Like these new ones are much more sculptural than anything else I've ever done before. The older ones. People would ask me all the time, like, what do you do with the dioramas? And I'd say, well, I throw them out because they're not things. They're just a table with piles of dirt and sand, and, they're being held up by, like if you look behind the scene, there's like a roll of tape holding something.
It's like the vehicle. It's part of the process to get you to.
Yeah. So, and I generally I build all of them for the camera. So that's the other thing too. They're not really meant to be like freestanding. Objects, so I build them specifically with the camera, and I keep looking through the camera to create the depth. It's sort of like the way a painter would paint a landscape, the way they would make the tree in the front larger and the tree in the back. So I'm like forcing perspective the same way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
And you would never bring, say, this out to a show, obviously, because it kind of pulls the curtain back on your...
A little bit, although these pieces are, like I said, these are a little different, and I'm actually considering making sculptures, as sculptures. I'm considering doing that because these are just very, very different than what I had made in the past in that respect, like with the materials.
For like the landscapes, you use like model trees and stuff? Is that
these old? Yeah, the very first ones I did, like the one behind me, but then they're in the. I mean, I can show you some of the other ones, but then what I started doing is, like, I would drive around, and when people would trim their hedges, I would take the trimmed branches.
Really?
Yeah, and I would make trees out of the fake, I'd put down dirt and the fake branch, and I created entire forests. Like there's one body of work that I did, which I call The Wanderer in the Mist, which is named after a Caspar David Friedrich painting, who's a big inspiration for that body of work, like a romantic era landscape painter. And yeah, so I wanted to create. It was a very large diorama because they're usually about the size of a dining room table, sometimes double the size, depending. That was like a big L-shaped space, and and I created it and actually like walked around it, and I waited for. I created it next to a window, so I waited for different times of day. So I sort of treated it like it was a real forest, and would explore it with the camera.
Yeah. And is there a lot of like, in the trial and error stuff, do you find yourself like chucking things away, like, hey, this doesn't look right, this isn't what I'm going for?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Like there are times when I've worked on something for months only to realize like this isn't working.
Really?
Yeah, like I and sometimes that's almost my indication, is when something is really, I'm like not getting it and I'm not getting it and it's not coming out right. I've learned now to like chuck it much sooner, and then if I can come back to it. That's why I do like to often have more than one setup going at a time, so that I can pivot a little bit. Because sometimes I do find it is difficult. Sometimes I can't tell what's wrong with it in the middle of working on something.
And like for this piece here, this ice cream, like did you have to like go through different processes of materials to discover that this is what worked, or did it just kind of, like you said, intuitively just came together, or like?
Well, I did work with different material. By the time I made this piece right here, I've been working with this a little bit now, so I kind of had a better idea of how it was gonna work. But it's always a little bit of a, I don't know where the drip is gonna go exactly. It's a little bit like abstract paintings, like I'm not exactly sure. When that's kind of part of the fun, because there's an aspect of this that's me like being hyper controlling of every little sprinkle. Or sometimes I have like a tweezer and I'm putting it exactly where I want it to go, and sometimes like some of it I can't really control, and I have to just let it do what it's gonna do.
I guess like the real ice cream or candy would do its own thing in a way. If you just try and stack it up, you can't make it perfect. It's going to start melting and like
right, which is what I am ultimately trying to simulate in a way, and like so like the more conceptual idea behind it, all my work, but the newer work in particular, really does have to do with artifice, like simulation and reality. And in this particular body of work, it has to do with more with consumption, which is why it has to do with the sugar and the food, and how we as a society like overconsume, and then the play between the real and the artifice. So one of the things I've been reading a lot lately is Baudrillard. Jean Baudrillard is a French 20th century philosopher, and the simulacra and simulation in particular, and it's really brilliant because he's really talking about how, and I believe it was written in the early 80s, and he's talking about how consumer culture, that in this like modern world we're having difficulty, or there's a blurring of the lines between what is real and what is simulated, and it's creating a consumer culture. And like an example I would use to like a real world example would be something like and I'll use food as an example, like barbecue sauce. Like a barbecue sauce would say it's got real mesquite flavor, it has, or like homemade, like it's like homemade mashed potatoes, but it's not homemade. and it's like a chemical in making that mesquite barbecue flavor. It's not a barbecue, but we accept it. Not only do we accept it as like, oh, homemade, we don't question it, and we like it better. Like he argues that we're gonna like the simulation more than we're gonna like the real.
Yeah.
And that like the further you go down the rabbit hole, the more we become
Separated from the real.
Separated from the real, and that we become more, like another example that I like, because it really does relate more to my work, is what's that brand of, it's salad dressing, Hidden Valley. Like there's no actual Hidden Valley. There isn't a place like that.
Yeah.
And, like there's like this fantastical idea that there's, like cows that can, that expel ranch dressing or something, like so, and we just accept all of these kind of strange
play on words to like sell
things, and we buy into, or like, deeper down the rabbit hole would be, and this is prior to him writing that, would be like when people go to a concert, right, and they're looking at holding up their phone,
right,
and they're watching the concert, and they're not really at the concert, they're not really experiencing the concert, they're experiencing it through the phone, which he would refer to as the simulation of reality, because you're like simulating reality through
most definitely
some other filter. So that's what's always interested me about photography and creating these worlds, is this idea of like simulating, whether it be history from the Natural History Museum, or like simulating history, we're simulating the landscape, we're simulating, so I'm creating these more fantastical worlds now. So what was interesting about your comment was, I guess I'm sort of simulating AI, which is really a challenge. Like I'm really up against it, because AI is pretty good.
For sure.
So I think I find that to be an interesting challenge. So yeah, I'm thinking like, how can I make even a greater fake out to like people not even thinking this was made by hand.
Have you ever thought of like establishing a website that could be like a chat GPT, but where you're, people are giving you ideas to turn into AI or something?
Well, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. But
you could like intercept these concepts before it gets to ChatGPT or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I could do like a challenge where like I have like, Dolly or whatever, like create the same thing I create, and we see which one.
Right.
I right now this may be different in 10 years from now, or 2 years from now, or 6 months from now, but right now I think I would create it more real than AI, because there is a quality of AI that looks artificial.
There's always like a tell, right?
There's always a little bit of a tell. So I think mine, because it is a three-dimensional object that I'm photographing, does have more
depth to it.
Yeah. So right now, but I don't know, that might change.
That's really cool. And well, that brings me to your video that you had, that movie that was playing the loop. How did you get like that? Like it's almost like someone's like flying, into this world. How did you get that perspective? And what did you use? The same camera that you used for your photography, or?
Yeah, but it's specifically through the cotton candy clouds.
Yeah.
It is a particular lens. It's a.
I mean, you don't have to give away your secrets, but I'm just.
All right, but it is a specific. All right, thank you. It is a specific lens, though. Yes, it's a specific kind of lens that. That helps create that effect. And it's on a track. I have the camera, and I do have the camera on a track, because I also.
That's interesting.
I've made a short film, like I have worked in filmmaking, and I have made a lot of video art in the past. So.
Do you always couple it with your
usually,
photography?
Usually I do. So the intention with this body of work is to make more videos. I have a couple of ideas in my head. I've started a couple things. I just don't have them sitting out right now.
Sure.
Because they're in mid-process.
Wow, I love that track concept that you use, that equipment. It makes it really, more real, and you get into the...
You're able to, yes. This particular lens makes it so that you can really get inside. And it makes everything look much larger than it really is. So it definitely tricks the eye a little bit.
Yeah. And well, I wanted to ask you how you got started in art, and what was your first sort of medium, and what inspired you to become an artist, I guess.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird question. No, it's not a weird question. It's a common question, but I never know how to answer it because I think I can't actually remember a time when I did not want to be an artist. So it's
You have like a formal education in art?
I do, yeah. I did undergraduate and graduate degree in art, and as an undergraduate, it's it's more like a visual art, so you study everything. But I always concentrated in photography, and then when I got my master's degree, it was specifically in photography. And then working on these, when I was always interested in setting things up, maybe not building things, but like setting up like people or situations. And I did study with Gregory Crewdson and James Casabir, who also very much heavily deal with the setup. I also very briefly got to work with like Thomas Dumond, who also creates the environment, and so kind of help. And even while I was in graduate school, I wasn't making work specifically like that. It did instruct me later about how to do this and how to use that kind of language to speak. But yeah, photography is, like I said, I've always been interested in this idea of manipulating reality, and I think with photographs, there's always this, so one of the people I did study with is John Sharkowski, who was the curator he was the director of photography at the Metropolitan Museum for like 30 years. And I had met him just when he had, after he'd recently retired from there. And in this really famous essay he wrote, in The Photographer's Eye, and this was written in 1955, he talks about how we believe the photograph is real to the point where we almost believe the photograph more than we believe reality. But the photograph isn't real. And that has always like stuck with me, that it's not real. And he would sort of say like, it's a 1/25th of a second. You're editing the world. Like even Ansel Adams, it's his perspective on Yosemite. It's not like, maybe an example of this is somebody like an untrained photographer like shows you their travel pictures at, I don't know, the Grand Canyon or something. And they don't look that great. Like the Grand Canyon doesn't even look that magical or anything because they're standing there and they, got their arm around somebody or they're smiling and they're looking, and it doesn't like look like anything. But a trained photographer who knows, or someone who knows how to take a picture might know how to frame it in such a way so that it looks a particular way. So he would sort of argue that it's really about like the lens you're using or the way you're taking that picture that makes it your perspective.
Right, yeah. So
that's always like kind of fascinated me about photography, and I think that's the power of photography too. Like in the past, I had this show that was like more outer space. Like the work was like very, it had like other planets, and it didn't look real at all. And people who weren't familiar with my work came up to me at the opening and saying, like, "Wow, like how did you do this? How did you, and I think I'd had a couple of drinks and I said something like, yeah, I worked with NASA and they let me, I was getting all silly about it. I thought, how do they not know this is fake? And it's because it's a photograph. And when we look at a photograph, we like automatically just want to believe it's real, even in the face of digital photography, right? We look at celebrities and we know that they're photoshopped, and yet people are still going out getting plastic surgery because they want to look like some influencer, even though we logically know that they're probably being altered, we still kind of believe it.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really interesting and powerful about photography is the way we could really tell whatever story we want to tell as the artist, as the photographer, and it can be believable.
Oh yeah. Were those real planets and things that you used in your sci-fi
No, it was
themes?
all made up stuff. It was just all completely fabricated.
So not based on anything, yeah.
Not really, no, yes. That's why I thought it was kind of funny. Like, what am I, on Mars? How could I possibly, and even like the images, like how could I possibly, and I'm not trying to make fun of the person that said that to me. It was just more like, I think it's just a natural reaction is like, how could this possibly not be real?
Maybe you have some stake in the Hubble telescope or something.
That's what I wish, yeah.
That's really cool. And is that, like, I guess you've gone through different sort of themes. You mentioned the landscape stuff, the sci-fi things, and now is this your first time working with food?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
This is like formally, it's a bit of a departure from the other works. This is definitely more lighthearted and kind of like silly, which I like, which is one of the things I'm enjoying about it, is not having it feel so dark and, I don't know, serious. Although I do think there is a bit of a darkness to it in a different way, just not like in terms of the color palette. You know, like everything is disintegrating, everything is melting. I also think there's an element of this that is about the impermanence of things, you know, the idea that it's not, I mean, they're lasting because I'm making them last, because they're not made out of cake and they're not made out of ice cream, so they can last. But I guess the idea behind it is that it doesn't. Everything, you know, everything eventually melts and everything changes, right?
Sure. That's true, yeah. And do you like to bake and make like huge desserts on
No,
the side?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't. And, you know, and I think I'm not a very good cook and at all. And I like baking, but it's not really. No.
And have you ever thought of going back to some of the old themes, like, you know, more landscapes and other themes that you've touched on in the past? Or what's your next project?
This is I'm still working on this one. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I just really started this. I just like touched the surface with it. I really want to see how much further I can go with these sort of strange worlds. And again, I'm more interested in like this idea of consumption, like the ideas of like how we consume things. So I mean, what form it will take a year from now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm still going to go down this path a little bit further, because most of these other works took me years. Like I worked on them for a long time, because each one, you know, each setup takes a while. And just like you said, like in a year I might make 15 pieces, but really only like 8 of them are what I'm going to use. You know, like they don't all don't all like make it to the end. Some of them get chopped off the chopping block, you know. Some of them end up not being good. And then sometimes years later I look back and go, why didn't I like that? Why did I think that was bad? You know, sometimes I'm too close to it to even see, you know,
Interesting.
what's good or bad.
Have you ever thought of like a all-you-can-eat buffet? Like making is that kind of too...
Well, you know what I have thought about doing, you know, in relation to this, is holidays and seasons.
Gotcha,
Holidays/seasons,
That's
because like there's so many holidays that are revolving around specifically candy, and we have one coming up, which is Halloween, which is all about candy, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about it, like, you know, Easter and Christmas, and, you know, they're all about, like, there's a chocolate bunny, there's a candy canes, there's and we equate certain times of the year with certain candy. Like, you know, I made a piece that's going to be in a show coming up called Political Circus, and I really never make political art, but this is the one piece that I made that is was unintentionally political, but I was thinking about the seasons, and it was summer. I mean, it was summer when I made it. It was July when I made it. It was coming up on July 4th. And I thought about those red, white, and blue popsicles, right? So it was kind of like a weird season one, because it's summer, but I made it with like melting icebergs. Like I made it around like in a scene where it's melting, and it's melting around like in an iceberg scene, which I guess could have like environmental kind of connotations to it also. But then I guess it has like sort of like political ones too, because it is like a red, white, and blue popsicle. So it was a little unintentional, but I meant it to be summer, but it kind of looks like winter.
Oh, that looks cool. Yeah,
makes no sense. Yeah.
Where's that going to be shown?
That's going to be at FAU, the FAU Schmidt Gallery, and it's coming up, I think, next week is the opening.
Okay.
And it's going to be called Political Circus. It's just that one piece. It's a group show. It was curated by Lisa Rockford.
Okay, very cool. Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good timing for a show like that.
I'm pretty sure that was intentional, right? To do that right over the election. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And I see this hand up here. Is that something you created?
No, that's why I got a little sidetracked.
Yeah.
No, that's not a piece of mine.
Oh, okay.
No.
Is that politically connected in any way to anyone?
No.
No? Okay.
No. I know it's kind of a showstopper in my living room, but
Yeah, like someone's breaking through your wall.
someone's breaking through my wall. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a cool piece. No, but that doesn't. No, I have a lot of art in my house that's not mine.
Okay.
There's a lot of other artists. You know, years ago, I mean, like a long time ago, I used to be a curator. I curated at the Art and Culture Center of Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I still have that part of me that likes to curate my house
Oh, for sure.
with other artists' work, and you know, it makes me happy to look at other people's work.
Yeah, you've got
I
some
don't.
really cool stuff.
I don't only just want to be surrounded by my own stuff.
Oh, I hear that. Yeah, no, you got some really cool stuff in here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you got good taste, and it matches up nicely together, you know.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
And you mentioned FAU. I understand you're a professor. What do you teach, and where do you teach, if you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I teach at Palm Beach State College,
Okay.
but I teach at the Boca campus, which is on the FAU campus, so it is the kind of like right there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I teach art appreciation and film appreciation and photography classes and digital art. Those are the main classes that I teach.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And does that ever like inspire your, work that you're working on? Like, say, some subject that you're teaching to your students would like kind of lead into, say, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could, tap into that. Or
Not really. I don't, because I'm mostly teaching like beginners. It's a 2-year college, so I'm mostly getting students like right out of high school, or like they're real young and they're just kind of getting started. But what it does inspire me, the way it does inspire me is because of that fact. They're not like jaded or they're like these excited sponges, and I enjoy. I think especially with the photography class. I don't want to say that. I think the film and the art appreciation as well, where you watch somebody's like learning about something new, something they didn't see. Like the film appreciation class is fun because everyone's gone to the movies, right? It's something we're all familiar with. Like, with art history, people don't, there's a lot of people that haven't been to museums, so it is sort of like they're not sure how to look at art. But with that, it's fun because they'll see something they've never noticed before about like the way cinematography, like how you can use cinematography to tell the story. The way lighting tells the story, the way the costume designs, the color palette of a movie tells the story. There's all these different elements that most people don't notice when they go to a movie. They're just, a good movie, you're engaged in the film and you're not noticing those things, which is ultimately a good thing because you want to just follow the story. But when you actually learn to dissect it, like the comment I get most from that class is, I'll never look at movies the same way again. Now I'm going to notice the musical score, and now I'm going to notice, like Star Wars, without the musical score in Star Wars, like when Darth Vader, when they put up the Death Star without that music behind it, it just looks, it's flat.
Yeah.
You don't really think it's like some evil, thing is about to happen. So, it's like just like pointing those things out. So that's what I love about teaching.
Cool.
So it doesn't necessarily inspire me like with a specific idea, but it inspires me because it reminds me all the time how exciting art is. So much of, I don't want to sound negative, but like it's hard, it's difficult to be an artist in today's culture. It doesn't always make you a lot of money. It can or it can not. And it doesn't have the same value. Even in the education system, it doesn't have the same value as math has, or an accounting class has. Like art is like seen as maybe superfluous, or like students even grapple with, should I even major in this? What am I going to do? What kind of job can I get? So there's something exciting about there's something about the act of creation. That act of seeing, I think, is so human, and it brings people, at the risk of sounding like hokey, like joy. So there's something fun about that experience of me witnessing people discovering that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And have you ever encountered some of your students out, in the art world, having, taken one of your courses and then seeing them like maybe in a show together?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and that's exciting. Yeah, then they're like my little birds that fly away. It's very exciting. Cool. Yeah, I love that. Oh, wow. I don't have kids, so they're like my kids.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I love that when they go, go off to a college they wanted to, or they're in shows, and I always love when they keep in touch and I get to see them
Taken off.
Yeah, that's good. Some of them actually ended up teaching with me. You know, like after they got out of graduate school, I was able to offer them a job. I said, "Oh, why don't you come back and teach here at the college?" And
awesome.
so I've been able to work with a lot of my students, or some of my students, as colleagues, which is great, also.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
And have you ever been approached by anyone to use your photography in like advertisements or anything? I could see like, I don't know, some ice cream Bluebell or something saying, "Hey, we want to use this for a campaign or something."
No, this, like I said, this body work is very, very new. But I would absolutely welcome doing some
sponsorship.
kind of 100%. I think that would be so much fun. So let me know if you hear of anything.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna look into it for you.
Yeah, sure.
And do you have any other shows coming up besides the Political Circus one?
I don't have any solo shows, but I'm gonna be in a couple of group shows. There's one in Miami coming up called Almost Me. It's a group show, and in Fort Lauderdale in the beginning of 2025, there's going to be a show. I believe it's called Rehearsal for an Exhibition. It's going to be a group show where the artists are given a small amount of space. And I mean, the premise behind Rehearsal for an Exhibition is you get to like work through an idea that you want to work through, so you get a chance to like try something out.
Oh, that's nice.
And
that's neat.
And I'm not sure 100% that I'm gonna do this, so I resist saying it on a recording. But I was actually toying with the idea of making these into like light boxes, that instead of seeing them as printed photographs, that they would be like almost like advertisements. Like I might like light them from behind and have them almost look like those ads you see in the mall.
Oh yeah.
So
like what scale would that be in?
Probably, and I haven't quite like worked out the details of it, but not huge. Not like still like, I don't know, like what is that, like 30 by like 25 by 35, something like that. Just be interesting to see them potentially lit. I don't know, like I haven't done it yet, so I'm not sure about it, but I'd like to try it.
With
like
slide film or like?
No, I'd be like
the actual model itself.
No, but just like the photographs
Right.
you see. But I would, I'd probably have to print them on some kind of plastic that then gets lit from behind.
Oh, cool.
Like I said, I don't know the logistics, so this
Sure.
may not even be as easy to do as I think. But I just look at like the way they do it for advertising. I just don't know.
It makes sense for that show though, because you're.
Be a chance to try something. Yeah, I think it could be interesting.
Yeah.
It might not be. It might be terrible.
No,
but
it's a great idea.
I'd like to see how that would look to just show them differently, like maybe lit. But anyways,
that's a cool idea.
like I said, this work is still like, it's not even a year old. Like so to me, this is still in its infant stage. I'm still like, it's like the way I feel about these very first landscape pieces. Like the earliest ones were, a lot of it was just like working through like how do I do this, and then I got more conceptual about what do I want them to be about. So I think I'm finally in the stage of now I sort of understand what I want these things to be about, and I have a better better grip on that. So and the material. So
Very cool. Well, it sounds like you got a lot of good stuff coming up and some great ideas to work with.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to see the next step for you. And well, thank you so much, Samantha, for talking with us today and sharing all this really great backstory to your work and your process.
Well, thank you for coming. This was so much fun.
It's great. Love it. Well, we're gonna keep an eye out for you and hopefully see you at this show at FAU.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.